All right, there we go. All right, thank you all for coming back. This is Open Studio with Kristen Jeffers. This is an extension of the Black Urbanist Weekly, which I'm gonna just throw up here on the screen so you know. If you haven't already followed the newsletter here, let me gonna throw this up on the screen. Okay, there we go. We have me at some point here on the screen, and then this is my newsletter. This is it living on the website. And so if you haven't already, those of you who are on YouTube, I threw that in the comments. If you're on LinkedIn and or Twitter, go on my profile that's there. And I know some of you who are already on LinkedIn are already getting the newsletter. So let me go back and put up the block that I had playing before we started. Let me go ahead and use that as kind of our intro to what we're going to talk about today on the program. If you came in a little earlier, or if you just started streaming, I had this lovely image, combined images of, wait, here we go. There we go. These lovely combined images of myself on Capitol Hill. A few months after the insurrection, but definitely before what we're facing coming up now with rights being taken away. Then over on the left, at least my left, maybe your right, depending on how these cameras are flipped, I have an image from the recent production of the Parable of the Sower opera that was staged. It was a co-production between Strathmore and Woolly Mammoth at the Music Center at Strathmore. I want to thank the staff at Strathmore for giving myself press access and also allowing me to bring Les as a plus one. So we really enjoyed the experience, and I'll start with the play because you all, if you've been following me long enough, know that I've wanted to do a deep dive on Octavia Butler. Like, I feel like in addition to N.K. Jemisin and a couple other folks I'm going to talk about towards the end of our live stream today, she has been one of the most impactful people on this concept of Black queer feminist urbanism. She's talked a lot about what the world is going to look like if we don't plan right. And yes, this urbanism piece is for those of you all who are urban planners watching this. Some of y'all might be watching this to support me and be like, okay, yeah, okay, the other thing you do that isn't yarn, it isn't just being yourself. But yeah, that is why I found her work to be the most important and most canonically important. And when it came time to think about redoing, kind of putting back on the the putting back up like my bookstore, promoting promoting that. And I'm just going over here. I'm going to be pulling up my bookstore on Bookshop, because this and its sequel, Parable of the Talents, are both prominent. Now, you could definitely read all of these different. You can read all of her books. All of her books have relevancy to what we are talking about, but Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents have a specific relevance. Now, super fans may also know that there was going to be 3 books in the trilogy. I linked in the newsletter in the by the way section. I did link to the Electric Literature article that talks about that, and I think I linked to that before on a different newsletter. And basically, these are the books. And so I'm going to switch over from this graphic that I have here in the middle, and I'm going to switch over to this. I'm going to remove this graphic. My base is big again. Let me go to the bookshop tab where you can see my bookstore. The link is also in the newsletter link, which is on one of the platforms you are on, but you can always just go to bookshop.org/shop/Kristen E. Jeffers. I spell my name Kristen, and then another E, and then just Jeffers. And so you can see here, this is, oh wait, I don't think I put my bookshop up. Okay. There we go. There we go. All right, here we are. This is my bookshop store. You purchasing here supports this platform, and I have three specific bookshelves. I have one specifically for Black queer feminist urbanists. As you can see, there's Talents right there, Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, who was I also got a chance to see at this staging the Parable of the Sower opera, but I will get to that in a moment. And then other books, mostly written by Black women and gender diverse people around their experiences. Now, Chocolate City, of course, is not written by Black women, but it is about DC, which is where I live and where this all this information really started to ground for me. Consumed by Asia Barber is we're gonna talk about that book. We're gonna have kind of a special episode around some of my craft books and how they relate in. I also want to highlight Dr. Love, who has been doing this work for years. Many of you have had a chance to work with her. She is a medical doctor, as well as like she teaches her own like community schools, and many of us who do urban planning know it's the paradox, especially being a person of color doing urban planning, who's lived in a neighborhood that's been gentrified, who's lived in a neighborhood that's been uninvested in for so long. Then all of a sudden, the neighborhood is here and it's hit and it's big and it's fabulous, and boom, now we have to move. And so Root Shock and then all the subsequent books. So we could just do I could do a whole series book club, just and we may do that, so just be mindful of that. Speaking of books I have done book clubs on, I'm in a book club with The Body Is Not Apology right now. Very special book club with that, kind of a private one. And then Chocolate Cities, those of you who are patrons, you know we did this together. And so if you pledge on Patreon at the $40 level, you can get access to the entire breakdown. I did a chapter by chapter breakdown. I there's activities, and if you are interested in bringing that to your workplace, as well as my brand new training, Black queer feminist urbanist solidarity, affirmation, and facilitating injustice and belonging worksheets and trainings, you can pledge and get an individual copy of that on Patreon, or you can reach out to me, Kristen at theblackurbanist.com. Also, I just realized that I said we were just getting started, so we are definitely starting. So let me throw up here, since I'm talking about these training materials, I'm going to let this training materials, the patron stream, because that's another great way to support me. Bookshop is one way, bookshop.org/shop/Kristen E. Jeffers. And you'll be at the Kristen Jeffers Media Bookstore, which encompasses everything. The Black Queer Feminist Urbanist book list is what we're going to zoom in on. But I'm going to scroll down just a little bit and show you that I am not just thinking about, well, obviously I could just lift up my Black women and women of color, people of color, gender marginalized people of color, but then I also have the Black urbanist book list, where this is like, if I were to choose books on urbanism that need to be on the list, that this is that list that I would choose. And so, and give me one moment here. I hope you're hearing me okay. I realize I'm not using my favorite microphone today. This is still kind of a new thing for me, coming back and doing these live streams and such. Let's see. I'm gonna mute. I don't know if the right mic is there. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Okay, this is where the settings are. Mic loose. All right. My audio should be coming in a little bit better. I know you had to wait 13 minutes for that to happen, but yes, back to what's on the screen here. So this book list is my favorite, like, urban planning books. They don't have to be written by a Black woman. They have to be written by a Black person, Black man, Black gender diverse person. They are relevant to, if you're still working through Black feminist theory, if you're still working through queer studies, if you're still working through ability, like all the other things that intersect, and you're just starting with, okay, Black people of African descent, no matter what, especially if they are either haven't been colonized for their skin tone, or they've been enslaved, or like their ancestors have been enslaved, and then when the countries of origin, they still encounter discrimination. Like, we can talk about slavery all day, but we also know that we're going through things. And we are going to kind of talk about slavery today because we're talking about Octavia's book, where she says, slavery hasn't gone away, which technically it hasn't. Those of you who know, who watched 13th and those other documentaries that remind us that the 13th Amendment still allows slavery for those who are imprisoned. Well, that story goes back. So I talked earlier about Consumed. I mentioned Chocolate Cities, which I'm working through right now, but I believe it in it enough to go on the list because it really talks about how DC's relationship with its Black residents, as well as its Native American residents, that it pushed out the way, and all these different waves. If you think that this wave is new, if you think that this wave was new in the 70s, if you think the wave was new during the Civil Rights Movement, or in the 20s and 30s around Wilson segregating the federal government, or you may have not realized that even DC as a Black majority city, as a hub of Black American activity, predates the end of the Civil War. It predates the end of legal slavery across the country. Like, it's, you have free Black folks and enslaved Black folks. And yes, the urban enslaved experience is different than the rural one, more rural one. But yeah, that's there. And then Great Society Subway. Now, there's a chapter in Chocolate Cities that overlaps Great Society Subway. But then if you want to zoom out to the entire thing, Great Society Subway is a great book. I don't have Dream City on here that zooms more out to the Marion Barry administrations, that era, and a little bit of kind of where Chocolate City goes. In fact, fun fact that Chocolate Cities, that part, the Dream City part's actually went towards the end. So if you thought you knew about DC, you definitely know more now. And I had the great privilege of helping Melvin Mitchell, retired renowned architect who's helped build quite a bit of DC in tandem with other firms, was in community with several of the actors, was on the ground during 1968 as a Howard student, and just absorbing that. Has lived in New Orleans, has lived in Watson, LA. This is his volume, and I may move this back to the Black Queer Feminist section because he ends by uplifting several woman architects. He has said that he has agreed that the future is more feminine than it has been. Now, me as an MB person, I'm going to say the future is gender diverse. The future is post-binary, but basically, specifically thinking around something else that's going to go on the Black Queer Feminist Urbanist book list is Sister Citizen, which talks about all those, Dr. Melissa Harris Perry's great volume from about a decade ago now, but still, unfortunately, very relevant volume on political stereotypes and such. So that's the bookshop list. And then I'm going to show briefly I'm going to show briefly the resource list, where if you're like, okay, you've been talking about this for quite a bit, Kristen, where can I find this on your site in case I get lost? So let me go over here to the resources. And resources, it is theblackurbanist.com/resources. If you are at the very top, you can always find my newsletter. All the archived newsletters are here. You can go and find the resource page and some of the books that I talked about on, wait, but I realized I'm just tapping away. Okay, it's on the screen now. Top of the screen, and I know this is I know it's tiny for me because I'm in the StreamYard window and it's got it a little shrunken, but if you go over to the top, next to the homepage, Black Queer Feminist Urbanism Resources is first. Then the next thing in the menu is the newsletter archive. Then if you want me to come speak, and by the way, it will probably be Q4 before I want to come into a convention hall and do a stage thing, unless we do all of the COVID protocols. Like, I'm still in that experimentation phase when it comes to going outside. I'm still, if your venue all outdoors, if you all decide to wear masks, if we eat and drink in a different room and let the air conditioning do its thing, then yeah, absolutely, I would love to be at your conference. And we are also going to be doing the full summit. More details to come, but that'll definitely be towards the end of the year. And yes, you may occasionally see me outdoors. You may occasionally see me indoors. No, it's a good reason for whatever I'm doing because I'm still easing in, but you can always you can always book me. Invest in the platform. I have links to the capital campaign, the GoFundMe, Patreon, all those things. And I have a survey to build up our body of knowledge about what your Black queer feminist urbanist experience is like. So that survey is there. You can advertise in the newsletter. And also, by the way, if you this is the second stream I've done where there haven't been advertisers. Like if you want to advertise in the newsletter, I also will give you a shout out on this live stream. You don't have to come on here if you don't want to. You don't have to put your face up. I realize a lot of us are cameraed out. For me, this is my way of pretending that I'm outside. So don't feel like you need a camera on. I can always read a message that you want. I can put it in the newsletter, but you can advertise in the newsletter, and that's another way to support this work that's going on. And so that's all the way over on the edge. And then, yeah, terms and conditions, copyright, all the stuff you need to have on the website. But when you scroll down, and yes, my picture is on most pages, but on this particular page, my picture is there and the word resources is there. Now this page is going to go under renovation a little bit because I did this a couple years ago. This is a growing body of work for me. This is me taking this Black queer feminism and making it part of the feminisms. There are multiple Black queer feminisms, and adding the urbanism to it, which makes it a feminism in itself. And of course, adding in thoughts around, well, urbanism encompasses ableism and classism as well in its own special way. So anyway, that's enough about me. You've seen, I've talked about what's been going on. So let me go over to a slide where I have give you some information about this opera that I went to go see a couple weeks ago. Yeah, let me do that tab because there's a nice little video on that tab where you can get a taste of the show. Wait, let me remove that. That's not what I want to share. Let me share. And the other thing is, getting me more money means I get to get like a studio assistant to be doing all the page shifts and such. So if you want to contribute to that, please do. And that way we won't have these little weird moments. But let me throw up on the screen here. This is, and it looks like they're using probably one of a very similar theme here. You may see me, I'm going to eventually move some of my menu tabs to the side myself, but that's a graphic design digression. Let me see if this preview trailer will play for us today.
There's a new world coming. Everything gonna be turning over. Everything gonna be turning over. Where you gonna be standing? 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 Where you gonna be standing?
So yeah, that's what I went to go see a few weeks ago. And if you've read the newsletter, that is what I am reviewing. So I'm going to give you a little taste of my review, but you can read the entire thing if you click on the newsletter. But I know some of you all like to just listen. And by the way, don't ever feel like you got to like watch this. This is also made for you to just have on in the background and listen. You can roll it back, run it back. I just want to do what little I can as just a one-person operation to be better about accessibility. Of course, I don't even plan for you to watch these live. I just do them live because it makes it easier for me to just show up on the screen. So let me get back to what I just showed you, the Parable of the Sower opera, and talk a little bit about the book. So for those of you who have not read the book, I did link to kind of the review of the book. It is in the bookshelf. That's why I talked about the bookshelf a lot for the top of the show. And the concept is in these particular books is that we are in 2024. Now, we all know in real life 2024 is not that far away, and we're just as far from 2024 at this point as we were from 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020. For some of us, 2020 never really ended. 2020 started in March. Some of us in February, because I know in some regions, COVID-19 had already, and that's why it's called COVID-19, because it actually started in 2019. So it is it for you all. Let's think about where we are. And I mentioned that, and even on the stage, Tashi Reagan, one of the creators of this iteration of this story, was like, when we read Octavia Butler's work and we read about, okay, people are walling off their suburban areas. If you've seen some of the newsletter art for this week, that's why I took a picture of this retaining wall I saw driving out in the exurbs of Maryland. And I'm like, gosh, this is how it could happen here. And she did come here. Octavia did come here to do research for Kindred. So literally the person is going from Maryland to California and back in that novel. But this novel is not as metaphysical. Now, yes, the character Lauren has hyper empathy, and the way she has hyper empathy is still a little bit sci-fi. But living inside of a wall community, living in a wall community that's a people of color, majority people of color community, that's done a racially diverse community, but they are at the point where they're in a neighborhood that doesn't, you have to pay for services. And some suburban communities are incorporated, and your property taxes do go to an extra police force or extra fire department. And it might be weird to talk about, oh my God, wait, no police will show up. You have to pay them to show up. Like, it seems like they're so willing to show up right now. Like, we're trying to defund them. But that's, in this scenario, in the book, in the Parable of the Sower book, that is also part of the factors. And one of the things the opera does now, I was running a little late, so I wasn't able to come in and watch this in the room, but they did put this on the TVs in the lobby, which getting there and all of that is a whole other story. And I think I might save that for the newsletter. But even though this was written in 1993 and some of the technology wasn't quite there yet, she anticipated that we would be streaming news, that we would be picking and choosing our news, that people would be working from home. Like Lauren's father was working from home, literally teaching his classes on the computer. So she anticipated that in a world where we only had AT&T video phone. Now, who I would love in the comments, or if anybody wants to tweet at me if they remember AT&T video phone, definitely let me know. I can't see. Let me see if I have any comments over here. It doesn't seem like anybody's watching live, but yeah, if you're watching later and you want to think about what 1993 looked like in our technology there's another article in the by the way section about how she was conceiving this as a trilogy, and she was already thinking about some of these elements that she's had in the story in 1987. Already by 1987, you were having water shortages. The rainforest was like almost not a thing, and we're still, the battles over the rainforest. I mean, literally, Amazon is called Amazon, even though it has nothing to do really with the Amazon rainforest. So we have corporatized towns again. We have company towns again. We have enslavement again. We have people who are working as pretty much like indentured servants, or like household servants. We have polygamy in communities of color, which of course we still do, but we have it in this version of the United States. We have states restricting their borders, like their internal borders, much like we saw a little bit with COVID, where some states were checking for licenses, but especially pre-vaccine. And then just recently on April 1, you had to have a COVID vaccination card to come into Canada. So we've been through, and then of course we getting into what's actually going on at the southern border, and people coming in and trying to walk in, and the coyotes and all those things. Like, just like this discussion around, can The Handmaid's Tale happen now, is happening now. A lot of things that are happening in the parable books are happening now. Other things are not happening, but other things are. And so this story really brings it home. And what I said specifically, and this is why I kind of in the newsletter today, I really focused on church and really focused on this concept of church and everything. And I will just put on a little background music here. I found something that's called Into Space. I think that's relevant to what we're doing here. So, and let me see if I can. Okay. So, basically, we're going into this space, and we have, the spoiler alert. As I put on, I should have put spoiler alert on the description, but spoiler alert definitely on the newsletter. This is going into it's waves. It's waves of self-determination. It's waves of how religious fundamentalism, how the black church, especially a black church doing what a black church that's like, oh, well, all the imagery that we use and black spirituals and such. And honestly, the play uses that music. And I feel like this play and this opera is a wake-up call. It's like using that prayer service music, those Negroes, people call them Negro spirituals. For me, I call it like prayer service music, because that's where I encountered it. It was my parents singing these hymns in the shower. It was my grandparents listening to old, like if we would get our hands on like an old CD of like Mahalia Jackson or the Caravans, James Cleveland, even though he kind of bridges both my grandparents and my mom's generation. And of course, growing up with all the different gospel artists, more contemporary sounding like people. And of course now a lot of people like listening to folks like the Elevation Choirs and Hillsong and everything. This is rooted in that era of like spirituals. Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan was part of a musical group that sung to try to get people to think about doing the civil for civil rights. Basically, they were a civil rights singing troupe, and they would go and sing spirituals, and people would go hear them sing. And the idea was that would trigger people to take action. And so the lineage of this, taking Octavia Butler, and by the way, Dr. Reagan and Dr. Johnson Reagan and Octavia Butler in the same kind of contemporary age range. I am not sure today at press time if they were like friends, but I get the feeling that they at least interacted a little bit, or at least this work was something that overlapped. And then this is kind of that lineage. And of course, Tashi Reagan, her daughter, who is a butch lesbian, like gender non-conforming, like image here in the midst of these talents on the stage. And then you have two containers of the action. You don't have the full action. You don't have all this staging. You don't have all these props. When we see the movie version of this is really going to hit home, because by the time the movie hits, it's probably going to be around 2024, in our real timeline. And already where people have said they've seen parallels, or things have overlapped, or things have happened up and down and over again, all of this is something we're having to look at. And so I thought that they took the Reagans these Reagans took some of the stuff that other Reagan and other people like that did, and Octavia warned us about, and put it in this lovely container of music. Now, if you want, I'm going to throw up here on the screen something else. I'm going to throw up another project that Tashi Reagan is doing with Adrienne Marie Brown, who we got a taste of that at the tail end of the presentation on Friday night. Even it was Friday night, the 29th of April, because it's been a couple weeks since they did this. So let me throw up here on the screen Octavia's Parables. So if what I know I kind of just glazed over, if you like this kind of discussion of Octavia Butler and what she's saying today, specifically around Black queer feminism and such, this podcast is great. I have not gotten through, I think I'm on episode 8, so I'm basically, the chapters, the episode numbers line up with the chapters of Parable of the Sower. Then of course, as they're still doing podcast episodes of Parable of the Talents, and then now Wild Seed, another book, not in this trilogy, but there are some relevance, especially around gender and sexuality and ethnicity in the Wild Seed volumes and series. So this is a great place to listen to. This will let you dig deeper. But the one thing I do want to say, and I'm actually gonna bring back up the I'll just talk. I'll just have my head big. So, one thing I wanted to bring up is, like, I really liked that concept of having this music. I think the wake up call needs to happen now. So many Black churches have property. So many of them are trying to redevelop property. Some of them are in a different stages and phases of thoughts around what that means. Some people are trying to do like City on the Hill, Heaven on Earth, trying to be, they're trying to mitigate gentrification. There's different ways different churches see themselves and different religious organizations. It's not just, even though the music of the Black church is here, other religious organizations can kind of plant themselves in and need to ask themselves, okay, well, what would my members be doing in an extreme climate change time? Like, what were y'all doing when the hurricanes have hit New Orleans? We saw what happened with this most recent one, and how the response was a little bit better than Katrina, probably because people were already organized for COVID. COVID has hit us all. Like, what are we doing when natural disasters hit? What happened the day that the sky went orange and on the in the Bay Area on the West Coast? Like, she did not tell us that the sky was going to go orange. And she talked about it not raining anymore. Octavia did. But the sky went orange. And it could do that again because we're back in the fire season. I know we're already dealing with some fires. And even when I quoted myself again from the previous newsletter that I talked about this in, I said, okay, yeah, we have somebody trying to split California in 6 pieces. We have these fires and they're more imminent, and people like celebrities are losing whole estates. People are melting in their cars. Teslas are exploding. There's all these corporate entities. I mean, we're here in this world. And so I want to challenge urban planners, because you can go and dig deep in other analyses that focus on like what to do as a Black person. I mean, there's Dr. Monica Coleman and Tanvara Dew. Tanvara Dew she's another Black science fiction horror writer, and Dr. Monica Coleman is a minister who is working on opening up, like starting in the Christian tradition, but opening that up. She's done a lot of great work on mental health. Of course, this is also a mental health awareness month, so looking for some of her information. One of the other things she did during this pandemic period, they haven't done as much and talked as much intensely as not Octavia, Tashi and Adrian have, but they have another Octavia Told Us YouTube series. I've been told not to call videos podcasts, so they have another video series that they've done, a video kind of lecture series that they've done around these books. It's on YouTube, in kind of the same vein as Octavia's Parables, and all 4 of them sat down for a conversation a few months back. So if you want to dig deep into that world, and of course all of Octavia's books, they're in the libraries. Her papers are in the Huntington Library out in Pasadena, where Bello is in the stories kind of based on Pasadena, but it's not quite Pasadena. Like, I wonder, somebody's probably written on why she chose a different name, but that's the thing. That's those things that we think about as urban planners, specifically, road use. Like in the story, they are walking on the freeways. The parking deck at the BJ's, and yes, that is BJ's. At BJ's full, like if you shop at BJ's, it's really called Berkeley Jennison. I don't know why she spelled it out in the book. I guess to me it sounds a little more ominous to spell out BJ's full name. But if you shop there, and honestly, I can see that, and especially when I go to the one in Alexandria, Virginia at night, and it's kind of like empty and kind of sparse, but the armored guards are not there. You don't have armored guards at BJ's right now, and ours doesn't have a parking deck, because you can totally see that whole setup happening there, and everybody just trying to make it. Now there's other places where there are street vendors and everything. All of that's we're in that world already. And definitely she was as well. Street vendors have been there, and then people living in the national parks. I mean, There's a movie, Nomadland, that gets into that. I have not watched it yet, but I do watch a lot of the living in the RV, traveling as an RV. The Mom Trotter is I think they're a Nigerian family that decided to live in an RV, and that's a very interesting setup. There's so many levels here around black ethnicities that are not necessarily American, like second generation people. There's this idea that we wouldn't by choice move into an RV or downsize. Of course, shout out to Christine Platt and the Afro-Minimalist and her work and everybody else. Oh, there's so many people in this ecosystem, and this Parable of the Sower opera just gives light to that, and light to how we need to be thinking about planning cities, because we may cities themselves, and I know a lot of people hate to say cities can be environmental drags. I don't think it's so much city versus rural. I think it's okay, rural can be sustainable, but not if you're pouring like pesticides and stuff on everything, and not if you got the pig troughs. And shout out to the Crossroads podcast and my dear friend Rashida Green. We have that episode on the pigs in North Carolina, like something that I've seen where the water is going bad, and of course Duke Energy and those coal ash plants, and like I could just keep naming things that we are already doing. And Octavia Butler wanted us to take this as a cautionary tale. She didn't want this to actually happen. So she wanted us to find things to take this and to turn around. And much like the spirituals in the 60s doing these traveling spiritual meetings were supposed to turn folks around, like literally there's a spiritual about turning it around, not letting, nobody turn you around and keeping your feet on solid ground. And so these are the opera was grounding. And then there's other activities that are grounding. So with that, I'm gonna move into our kind of the section of before you go / by the way in this newsletter. I do want to shout out a couple other people, and one other thing that I'm doing that's not urban planning to kind of contribute to better environmentally friendliness, and why we're going to be digging deeper into textile and fiber as an urban planning conversation. Is something that's very important to me, something that's very impactful, something that I've grown up and grown around, and hopefully we'll have some of those authors that I've talked about on this program. And of course, if they show up, they can show up however they want to. You don't have to look at the screen, you can listen. But yeah, definitely let me go ahead and get my next screen share up here. Shout out somebody else. I like to call them my fellow Sagittarian sibling. We literally are 10 days apart on this calendar. Now, their work is beyond calendars. They are in, at least the one thing I will say is we have been billed as millennials. You'll recognize, of course, that wonderful image of Janelle Monáe. This is the article about them in Wired, about their work. The Memory Librarian, which is we got the emotion picture and the soundtrack of this work before we got this book volume. So in a lot of ways, the order that Octavia went is in reverse, and actually it's a beautiful thing that obviously Janelle is here to shepherd and usher her entire vision of what she wants to show and her Afrofuturism in this place. And so Memory Librarian, for those, and as well as the Dirty Computer emotion picture, if you haven't seen it, I won't play that the Dirty Computer trailer because it's a longer, that's about 18 minutes or so, and I'm gonna stop talking in about 10. It is about this concept of people deserving to keep their memories, and the character that Janelle has created that she kind of embodies in the book, and also in the not in the emotion picture. She's not as fortunate to be this person, but definitely the person that she's written about and kind of embodies in these stories that she's written with 5 other phenomenal Black and non-binary writers. Black women and non-binary writers. Let me clear that up. They're all Black. Different gender identities, but they are all exploring what this world is feeling like, in this world of memories being privileged, government people getting certain privileges, the advantages that are being taken care of, like what's here, what's there, surveillance, making certain people being dirty because of who they are, black folks, queer folks, disabled folks, all of that. And so that's, we traffic in identity over here. We talk about how the bodies we inhabit and the way we sound and all those things have something to do with what we're doing. So that is what she's doing here, and I wanted to shout her out. And there's a link to this Wired article, and the Memory Librarian is now on the bookstore shop bookshelf. We will go down, we'll take a look at that down the line. Also want to give a miniature shout out to N.K. Jemisin, who literally wrote a volume about cities having personalities and such. So that's also on the bookshelf. It's also on my personal bookshelf, so we're gonna get to that as well. And then I'm gonna switch tabs again, and I want to shout out somebody else who I've had the fortune not to meet yet, but definitely I know people are thinking about my work and her work in the same thoughts. And now this particular article is her being thought of over in the food world. So I want to congratulate, let me put her up on the screen. I want to congratulate Alexis Nicole Nelson. Many of you know her on the social medias as the Black Forager. And when I wrote about this, I see her, and every time I see her, I think about myself 10 years ago when I first started this venture, the platforms we had. And then I think about myself now saying, okay, I still have something to say, put up here. And I'm excited that so many more people have, from the groundwork that we laid, to have serious conversations spliced with pop culture, as it were, like more lighthearted conversations along with very things that are deeply researched and such, things that you'll want to go and deeply research, but also things that you'll want to just look over. So yeah, definitely look up Black Forager. Obviously in the book, The Parable of the Sower, there's a lot of talk around what to eat. The little town they create is called Acorn for a reason. Yes, you can eat acorns. And Alexis will tell you about a lot of other things that you can eat that are in your backyard or front yard or on the side of the road that are available to you. Like, there's so many things that I didn't realize we could eat. So we might have our hunger problem solved quicker than we thought. And so it's exciting to see that James Beard Foundation is recognizing this she's nominated in the social media category. She's still, we're still waiting, but still, you don't get these kinds of nods. James Beard, for those of you who aren't foodies or in the loop, is this they're basically the Oscars of food. So yeah, it's wonderful to see these people here happening. And finally, I do love to eat things, but I'm not as much of a foodie. But I do want to give you all a chance to see that you can purchase my very first crochet pattern. I'm getting that queued up right now, and this will be kind of what we end with today. One more opportunity to support me. If you all of this other stuff just doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to make a scarf, to my crocheters and to people who want to start crocheting, there's gonna be a video, just like I do owe my people in my training courses videos. There's gonna also be a video for this. But for now, if you know how to use a crochet hook, if you know your way around some chunky yarn, if you have, I literally have a whole skein of woolly stick and quick, which is exactly what is demonstrated here. There's 2 skeins of that wrapped up into that scarf. Feel free to get your needles on hooks out. I went to Maryland Sheep and Wool for the first time over the weekend. It was great. Looking forward to going up to Rhinebeck to New York Sheep and Wool. There's various yarn crawls. Looks like somebody I want to shout out hi to Mindy. Thank you so much. This is really exciting. This is of course, if you've read Parable of the Sower, it's this is my positive obsession moment here. This is the thing that I'm doing. This is, obviously I'm still doing this, still going to be doing these conversations Monday afternoons, Eastern time. The newsletter, are still going to be available. But as far as like, okay, if we need currency or if I need to clothe myself, you're going to be able to talk to me about figuring out what plants to clothe yourself with. That is the goal. I almost walked out of Sheep and Wool Festival with a bag of freshly sheared wool to process, soak, and spin and card, but I stopped myself because I realized I don't have the full infrastructure. Just like now, I got my little studio set up here, but it's a little harder to just sit there and like card wool if you don't know what you're doing. But I am gonna put my face back up on the screen. But yeah, this pattern is also in the links in the newsletter. So LinkedIn folks, it's already, yes, absolutely hard working as always. So yeah, links are in the LinkedIn version. And then if you're on Twitter, the links are in the newsletter that is there. The links are on Patreon folks. I didn't forget about you. The link's gonna go in there, and I'm gonna write your note for this week, as well as if you're already, it's not too late to hop on the training bundle. The training bundle is universal now. You can hop on it at any point in time, and I will be adding to that as well. So I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank you all for supporting. I want to thank you of your words. And in fact, I'm going to just put this comment up here. Thank you so much. Mindy is they're one of my advisors from undergrad. So that's how long I've known them. And so I'm going to celebrate everybody here today, celebrate you. And for those of you, I'm going to put the Octavia Butler image back up as we go out, and we'll leave the camera up for a little bit, but you can find me if you're on LinkedIn. You already connected with me, so just go to where you find me on LinkedIn and get linked into all the stuff, literally linked into all the stuff. If you're on Twitter, you're already connected as well. You can just click on, there's a special link for those of you on Twitter to go to subscribe to the newsletter. I'm still debating, obviously this is me returning to Twitter. I'm still sorting through that, and I've got an article that I've linked to next week's newsletter that goes into that, my thoughts on that. So we'll talk about that on next week's episode. Haven't decided what book or whatever we'll discuss, but know that whatever we're discussing next week is going to be awesome. But in the meantime, thank y'all for watching. Please share, and I will see you on the next stream.